Hello everyone, and today we're going to do a little engine dress up on our S550 Mustang, and we're going to do this by retrofitting some fluid cover caps from the earlier models of the Mustang. And these are the covers we're going to be retrofitting, so let's get started. So let's go ahead and start with the easiest one first, which is our washer fluid. Now this isn't a cap cover, this is a cap replacement, and all you have to do is push it right on and it fits snugly, so there's no modification required. Next, let's go ahead and move on to our coolant reservoir cap. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this out of the packaging. Looks pretty good, nice beautiful aluminum. Now the old cap was a lot bigger. You can see where it has this flange around it. It actually takes up a lot more space. So this one we are going to have to modify just a little bit. Right here, let me go ahead and take this cap off real quick. And there we go. And let's go ahead and insert it in the cover. So it's going to go ahead and fit in there very nicely. It's got a little play in it, but that's no problem. But we're going to go ahead and trim off all that flange material around it just to make it fit beautifully and flush. So that's going to be the plan for that particular cap. Now let's go ahead and move up a little bit, which will be our oil filler cap. Now this one does take up a lot of surface area. You can see where the original oil cap, or the one from the 2014, is a lot bigger than this one. So it's going to require a lot more modification. Let me go ahead and take this one out. And as you can see, there's a lot of space or air gap between the cap and the cover. So most likely I want to create some spacers, that way we could take advantage of all that surface area. So now let's go ahead and move on to our master cylinder or our brake fluid. And we'll start by go ahead and checking out our fitment. And it looks like this cap almost fits on that cover. I mean, it almost feels like I could press it on. Let me go ahead and take that cap off. And bringing it together. Yeah, it almost feels like I can go ahead and press it in there. Like if I put this in a vise, I bet you those two will mate up. However, just so I don't damage anything, I'll go ahead and add some grooves to the cover. That way it gives it a nice snug fit. So now that we have a game plan, let's go ahead and get to work. We'll go ahead and start with our coolant cap cover. And I'm going to go ahead and take some painter's tape or masking tape. And I want to go ahead and mask off all the area I don't want damaged at all. This is pretty much preventing me from scratching on accident because I am kind of, accident prone. And all I'm doing is just taking the tape and putting several different wraps on it. And we'll press that down right there, and I'll add some on top as well. I don't want to scratch this. I want to keep this as pristine as possible. Now, ideally, I'd love to have a lathe. That would definitely make short work when removing this flange material. However, I'm going to have to use the tools I have in my garage. So I'll go ahead and zoom in, that we can get a better look. And I'll go ahead and take my rotary tool and go ahead and trim all this flange material off as much as I can with one of these discs. So I'm just going to go slowly all around it and just cut it away. And almost there. And come on, there we go. And nothing flew off, so that was pretty sweet. This thing is a little warm, but looking at it, yep, looks like we trimmed off quite a bit. So we're getting there. Now let's go ahead and move on to the sander. Now I know it's not the most efficient method, but it does work and it provides a nice smooth surface. So I'll go ahead and work this down until all the material is gone. And take a look at that. That thing is paper thin. Probably one more pass and that should all be gone. And almost there. And, oop, nice chunk came out. So far it looks pretty good. That's exactly what I was looking for. And as an extra little detail, I'm going to go ahead and smooth out the bottom of this cover. And I'm going to start by using 320 grit sandpaper and putting it on an aluminum plate. That way I have a flat surface. And then I'm just going to run the cover back and forth just to go ahead and smooth out all those scratches. And then after that one's done, I'm going to go to 600 grit sandpaper. Same thing, just run it back and forth. It's getting better and better. Then I'll go ahead and finish it off with 1500 grit sandpaper, but this is going to be wet sanded, so I'm going to add a little bit of water to this. And I'm going to do the same thing, add some passes. It's going to be a little messy, but it's still going to come out really good. Wipe it down with a microfiber cloth, and take a look at that. That edge looks really good, no burrs on it, and it has a nice little shine. And now that the hard part's complete, let me go ahead and remove all this tape. This is just kind of doing an inspection just to make sure we didn't damage anything. And it's got quite a few layers, so bear with me. And looking at that, so far it looks pretty good. No scratches. We didn't damage it. I think this one's ready to rock and roll, so we can go ahead and set that aside. So now let's go ahead and move on to our hardest one. This is going to be our oil cover. Let me go ahead and take it out of the packaging. And yeah, if you look at it, this thing's got a lot of surface area. So what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and measure it out, see how much we got to work with here. And I'll go ahead and set it in a metric system. And moving out, let's see. And we go and move this in front of the camera. It looks like we're at about 69.5 millimeters roughly. So our goal is to create spacers with a diameter of close to 69 or 68 millimeters. Now I have a hole saw right here that I ordered, and it should be relatively close. Let's take a look. So, and obviously it's going to be the inside diameter of this hole saw. And looking at it, it looks to be about close to 68 millimeters, which is pretty close. We can go ahead and work with that. And the hole saw we're going to be using, let me see if I can get it in the front of the camera right here. And that's focused enough. As you can see, it's a 73 millimeter hole saw. And for our spacer material, we're going to use that same aluminum plate as we used earlier. This plate is a 1/4 inch thick, but we're going to need at least 2 spacers, so it's going to be a 1/2 inch thick just because that cover's got some depth. And I'm just using the hole saw just to trace out some circles. They don't have to be perfect, it's just giving me some guidance. And we'll go ahead and start drilling out the left side. And we got a little depth, so we'll add some cutting fluid. And we'll go ahead and continue that one on. And, yep, so there's one right there. Apologies about the focus. And we'll go ahead and peel that one off. So that one doesn't look too shabby. Go ahead and do the second one. And there we go. And just to clean up the sharp edges, let me go ahead and sand this down a little bit. So since these have a hole in the middle, I'm just going to take a 6 millimeter screw, put it right in the middle. And we'll go ahead and give this a nice little light sanding on the edges. I'm not going to go in deep. I just want enough to get those burrs off of it. And yep, looks pretty good. Still rough, but it's no longer sharp. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And now we can work our way back to the original oil cap and go ahead and trace out the exact position. Now mine's a little off because my custom engine cover is slightly off. I didn't make it perfect and it's slightly tilted. So I'm going to first go ahead and mark out the position. That way I can go ahead and drill it out. And we'll go ahead and do this with a pencil, obviously. So that's about what I'm looking for. It's almost center, but it's just slightly off. And I went ahead and marked it off camera. Bring it in a little bit. So now we can begin slotting these oil cap spacers. And I'll go ahead and start with a center punch just to give me some drilling starting points. And there's the second one. Then I'll begin by drilling a pilot hole, which is an 1/8 inch drill bit. Now you're going to see I'm drilling this at an angle. That's on purpose. And I'm taking a stepper bit and doing the same thing. I'm going all the way up to 1/2 inch and I'm doing it at an angle. And the reason being is because once this is installed, it's going to be flush with the custom engine cover. And looking at that, we got 2 nice holes. So that's a great starting point. Now we go ahead and cut the rest of the slot. I'm going to use that same rotary tool as earlier, and this just takes a little bit of time. And that one should be done. Let me give it a little shake. There we go. This thing is a little hot, but now we can move on to the next one. And now we'll go ahead and sand out the inside of them just to go ahead and clean up that slotted area. So now let's go ahead and do a quick test fit, see how it looks. And it fits on there very nicely, very nice and snug. Yeah, I think that one's definitely good to go. And for our very last one, we have our brake fluid or our master cylinder cap. Now this one, we're going to just do a very easy modification because we have these little columns or hand grips. And we're basically going to go ahead and add grooves right in this cover right here. So it should fit in there nice and snug, and they match up with all these little indents you see. So this job should be pretty quick and easy. So let's go and do the same thing we did earlier. We're going to go ahead and tape this up. Same reasons. I don't want to scratch or create any scuff marks. Then we'll go ahead and gently put in a vise and add every one of these grooves. And I went ahead and marked the positions of them with a marker. And I'm just going to go do a little bit one at a time, just working it back and forth. So now let's go ahead and do a test fit, and oh, that definitely feels very nice. Yeah, it's going to be nice and snug. I don't think that one's going to cause any issues whatsoever. And now for our next step, it's very important attention to detail because we want those ponies facing forward. And we're going to mark every single one of these caps just so we know where the forward-facing position is. Now the coolant one is pretty easy. It's always facing forward. It just seems to do that even on the factory replacements. But I want to go ahead and mark that one anyway. And we'll do the same thing with the master cylinder or the brake fluid. I'm going to take the old one off. There we go. And I'm going to put my new one on there. In case you haven't noticed right now, I'm replacing every one of these caps because I'm attaching the covers to it permanently, so I'd rather have brand new caps. And that looks about center right there. Go ahead and take that one off, put the old one back on. Very nice. And same thing, I went ahead and purchased a brand new oil filler cap. And all the links are in the description, by the way. And it looks exactly the same, but of course we always like to test fit it. We want to make sure everything's perfect before we go ahead and attach everything permanently. And of course, do a nice little test fit. Beautiful. And obviously I want to mark forward because the last thing I want to do is tilt this the wrong way. Very nice. And since we're here, let's do another test fit and we'll make sure everything lines up very nicely. So there's the two spacers and there's the cap cover. And looking at it, yeah, that's going to work out very nicely as far as how it's aligned. Now I even bring the camera in. Look at that. Has nice even spacing all the way around. That's what I wanted. So go ahead and take those off. And I want to add a piece of tape to exactly where it needs to be because I'm tilting it just in the perfect spot. So now we're ready to go ahead and prep the surface of these caps. So I'm going to take some 80 grit sandpaper. I'm going to sand the inside of it. Pretty much I want to make sure that surface is a little bit rough. That way the epoxy has something to adhere to. And let's see, we'll get that one done. Looks pretty good. And then we'll go ahead and take some IPA or rubbing alcohol and just clean them up. Just to make sure there's no dust or debris left behind. And so far, that looks pretty good. Do the next one. This is going to be our coolant reservoir one. Very nice. And we're going to do the top of the caps as well, just to make sure there's no oils or anything left behind from the factory. And of course, we do our spacers as well as our oil filler cap, just to make sure there's no oil left on that one as well. And now for the magic epoxy. This is some JB Weld, very strong stuff. So now we get to attach the coolant cover first to its cap. And I'm pouring a little bit in the container just so that way I have an even amounts of hardener and epoxy. And I'm going to put it right in the cover because that's where I'm going to mix it. And I'll take a stirring stick that came with it, stir it up, and it should turn to a gray color. And add a little bit more. Very nice. And I want to make sure I get some on the sides as well. And I'm going to line up those 2 points I have because I went ahead and marked where the center is or the outside position is. Go ahead and press that down. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I'm going to set that aside and not touch that one. So now we can move on to the brake fluid cap and cover and do the exact same thing. We're going to fill the cover up, mix it up, try to get all the sides. And I still have that mark where the front is facing. Make sure I line everything up. Okay, pretty good. And give it a nice press. I want to make sure this thing is nice and flush. I even have a little bit of epoxy come out, which is fine. I'm just going to go ahead and grab my shop towel and give it a nice little cleanup. That's kind of a good thing because it means that the whole area is covered on the inside of that cover. And that looks really nice. That looks pretty good. Same thing, set that aside and not touch it. Now for this one's a little tricky. This is going to be a two-stage process. We need to attach the bottom spacer to the oil cap itself first. And I'm going to use the container the epoxy came in just to mix it up. So same thing, I want that gray color. And I'm going to apply a nice hefty amount to the top of the cap. And yeah, we probably got good coverage. I don't want to get any of it near that rubber seal. I want to keep that away from it as much as possible. And then go ahead and line everything up. That tape is going to stay there because that basically gives me the perfect alignment I need for that cap and that spacer. I'm going to add a little bit on top as well, just to kind of fill that gap a little bit.
Tomorrow.
So now that we let that sit overnight, let's go ahead and prep the oil cover. Same thing, I'm going to take that 80 grit sandpaper, scuff it up. Looks pretty good. Now I'm going to clean it with some alcohol. Very nice. And now, let me go ahead and take this tape off. And it should peel off fairly easy. And yeah, almost there. Now just trim off that excess tape. And now we can go ahead and clean up the surface using our alcohol and microfiber cloth. And the same reason, I just want to make sure it's nice and clean. And yep, that looks pretty good. And we'll do the same thing with the top spacer as well. Clean both sides. Perfect fit. Alright, and we'll do the same thing as last time. We'll go ahead and mix our epoxy right in the cover. Give it a nice little mix. And it looks like we have the exact amount of epoxy we need because this is pretty much the whole syringe. Now I'm taking that extra epoxy and I'm going to go ahead and fill in any gap I can between the spacer and the cap. And then I'm going to sandwich that extra spacer right on top. And then go and fill in that again some more. I want to make sure every area is covered because the more coverage, the better. Alright, looks pretty good. Let's line up our marks. And I'll press it right in. And taking an inspection, looks pretty good. Looks like it's pretty centered. So now we go ahead and let this aside for 24 hours.
24 hours later.
Alright, now for the best part. Let's go ahead and install our new caps and covers. So we'll start with the coolant first. Take that one out, put our new one in. So far this looks really nice. And I'm going to switch hands that way I don't hit the camera. And one more turn. Perfect. Now it's going to go to the washer fluid. Now this cap comes off pretty easy. All you got to do is press downward. And there it goes. And we'll go ahead and set that aside, get our new cap, go ahead and throw that right on. And of course we want it facing forward. And make sure it's nice aligned. Yep, nice and snug. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the master cylinder or our brake fluid. That cap came off pretty easy. Put our new cap on. And so far so good. Beautiful. That thing faces forward as well. That's very nice. And lastly, the one I'm kind of sweating, this is going to be our oil filler cap. So we'll take the OEM one off, and let's throw in our new one. Crossing fingers and toes. And oh, that is awesome. Well, if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe.